Hello, everyone. I'm Peter Tabuns. I'm your MPP. We're just letting people in. We have well over 100 people registered, and so we'll give them a few minutes to get in, and then we'll get going in a formal way. Thanks so much for joining us. Hello, everyone. We're still welcoming people onto the webinar, so give us a minute or two longer. We have well over 100 people registered. We've got 61 who've come in and continuing to come in. Give it a few more minutes so that everyone is allowed to be here at the same time. I'm Peter Tabuns, by the way. I'm your member of Provincial Parliament, and I'll be introducing the webinar in just a few minutes. Okay, so why don't we get rolling? As I'd said at the very beginning, I'm Peter Tabuns. I'm your member of Provincial Parliament for Toronto-Danforth. I want to welcome you all to this evening's webinar on tenants in the pandemic. Very tough time for tenants, very substantial questions that we have to address. I'm going to start by doing our land acknowledgement and go from there. We acknowledge we're hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas, of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and the Inuit peoples. And I also just want to note, given the discovery of the graves of 215 children at a residential school in British Columbia this week, how difficult the situation is for our First Nations and how important it is for us to recognize what's been done to them, what the role has been to make this land what it is, and what needs to be done to address the issues that they have been confronted with by us for so long. And with that, I'm going to turn the next stage over to my colleague, Councillor Paula Fletcher. And Paula, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Peter. I think everybody notices that you've had a very chic haircut, and I want everyone to know that he did it himself. He did not go out. He did not go out and have an illegal haircut. He used the dog clippers that he found in the cupboard. It looks pretty good. It's great to see everybody here tonight. Thanks so much for joining this, because this isn't the first time we've had a tenants meeting, but really and truly during the pandemic, it has been cataclysmic for tenants, as those of you who are on this call know, and our many panelists who are from tenant organizations and organizations that support tenants certainly know. The number of trying to stop evictions during the pandemic, trying to get people's places fixed up during the pandemic, trying to deal with the landlord-tenant board during the pandemic. It has just been so difficult. So for every one of you who's gone through any struggles, we're here for you. And we're here tonight to hear from you, talk with you, and look at how we can manage things even better. You may have individual problems. You can post those. You may have comments. You may want to connect with our great panel that we have. There is a Q&A function on the Zoom. I think you all, I'm sure everybody here is pretty familiar with Zoom, and please use the Q&A. The chat function is not enabled on this particular model, Zoom model, so you'll have to use the Q&A tonight. Tonight, we're going to have 4 great panelists. I'll introduce them in a minute. They're going to talk for about 5 minutes each. You're able to ask questions or have commentary, and then we'll close off. And Peter, I'm assuming you also want to say a few things about what you've been doing in the legislature, and I can also give a quick update of what we've been doing at City Hall. So that's how we're going to run that tonight. But Peter, I think you have a poll that you're going to run now just to see what's happening. They're good people online.
Thanks very much, Paula. I do have a poll, and I do have some comments about what's going on in the legislature. We'll do this first poll. We're trying to get a sense of where people live so that we can get a better sense of their issues. So you can see the poll in front of you. Please vote if you're in a rental building, a walk-up rental, condo building rental, or rent a house or rent a room or other, and we'll share those results with everyone. So if you could start voting now, that would be great. Okay, you're starting to vote. Ah.
Can everybody see the poll, Peter?
Yeah, Paula, there
Someone,
are only about 15 people left to vote, so
okay, someone
they
said they
can
couldn't
see it.
see it, but I'm sure they can now.
Yeah. Okay. We'll give you all just a few more minutes, no, a few more seconds actually, because you're going at a pretty good clip. And then I'll end the polling and share the vote. Okay. And I'll end the polling. Oh, well, one or two last minute voters. Paula and I know all about last
Yes.
minute voters. You're an
We want your
important group. We talk to you a lot. Okay, I'm gonna end the polling there. And you can see the results, 60% are in rental buildings. So yes, very much a group that's had a tough time. Walk-up rentals, 9%, condo building rentals, 6%, rent a house, and then other, 21%. Thank you all, share results. Yep. And then I will download. Don't mind my speaking out loud. I'm learning bits as I go along. So I just want to say a few things about what's going on at the legislature, because it bears on what our panelists are talking about this evening and what you're experiencing. We're very worried at the legislature by the decision of Doug Ford to lift the evictions ban on Wednesday, despite the fact that most COVID-19 orders will still remain in effect. And the reality is, and you know it, pandemic's far from over. Thousands of people are struggling due to lost jobs, and they're struggling because of lost income. It's no way their fault. We've been calling for an eviction on moratoriums until after the pandemic, plus tougher protections against illegal evictions and rent subsidies for households that have lost income due to COVID-19. I think the rent subsidies are really important, particularly in a situation where you're renting a room or a flat in a house. You're dealing with a homeowner and they don't have the corporate resources that the big apartment building owners do. So to keep them in their houses and keep you in their houses, you need a rent subsidy. And for people in the big apartment buildings, you need that rent subsidy to protect you against those landlords. And we all know that disproportionately, the people who've had a tough time are the ones who've been frontline workers, the ones that we talk about so much in the media and in the legislature. Well, if you're a frontline worker, you deserve protection. One of the things that we pressed in the legislature was an end on processing evictions during the pandemic. And I know Luis from Don Valley Community Legal can speak to this later. We want to ensure that the virtual landlord-tenant board hearings don't become permanent. There are huge problems with that. Luis, you may well be able to address that in some detail. But we've seen from these online hearings that they unfairly disadvantage tenants. They assume everyone's got high-speed internet and sophisticated computer skills. Well, a lot of people don't. That's the reality. And making those hearings permanent would be a huge disadvantage to tenants. We've had a number of our MPPs attend those meetings virtually. Tenants get disconnected. Some are unable to reconnect back into the hearings. They find the process confusing, as we did. And so we think that if you're actually going to protect tenants, you need to restore in-person landlord-tenant board hearings. And you may all have heard about this, but in case you haven't, a lot of tenants have taped these hearings because of obvious inadequacies, obvious unfairness. And the Ford government has just brought in a $25,000 fine for unauthorized hearings of those virtual hearings. That is very bad news. One of the last lines of protection for tenants against unfairness is open courts. And if tenants can't actually get the word out as to what happened, they're at a huge disadvantage. So that's what's going on at the legislature right now. Ford government being really backwards on tenants issues. We're pushing them hard. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Paula to call on our panelists to speak. And I know, Paula, you had a few other comments that you had to get in there, and I think it's important for people to know what's happening in the city. Paula, it's all yours.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks very much. And thanks for all your great work at Queen's Park and defending tenants. I have just quickly on June 14th at 7 o'clock, there's the committee meeting, which is what we struck during this term, the subcommittee on the protection of affordable housing. And it was struck very much because of all of the renovictions that were taking place and how to stop those from kicking tenants out of places that they've lived in for a long time at extremely reasonable rents. So it was very focused on N12s and N13s, but that is at June the 14th at 7 o'clock. You're able to tune in on that. I know a number of you will be there. Some of you are on that committee. So that's a very exciting thing that we've done. Also, we have a project underway to help give people information. It's at toronto.ca/renter-help. Kinds of letters and things that you might need if you're facing eviction or facing tenant issues. Just everything there, templates for you. That was developed recently. And also along with Don Valley Legal, we're looking at creating what I'll call a rapid response. If you get an N12 or N13, then here's what you should do right away in order to maintain your right to have that housing. The renter help is about everything to do with tenants' rights. I think we all know that New Westminster passed a bylaw about renovictions in order to stop them. That seems to have worked quite well. So based on that, I had a motion at our last committee meeting asking for them to report to our committee on how that might apply in Toronto. And I know that many of you will be very interested in that and are following that and will contribute to that. And thank you very much for all the work you're doing. The rent grant program that the city has, we did try to make sure people weren't kicked out and then didn't have money, or didn't have money and then get kicked out. So I think we just want, I know we'll hear from Acorn, but wow, such a big victory on the rent grant program. So loans being converted to grants and a whole number of things. I don't want to steal Shahid's thunder here, but we just should acknowledge that, wow, that's pretty amazing work. I'll give you one other bit of info, and that's got to do with air conditioning units. Last year, Peter and I we looked it up and sent letters to landlords or different building owners, Starlight and others, that were telling tenants they couldn't have air conditioning units in their windows. And we said, unless it's in your lease that you can't have it, yes, you can have it. So working together with the tenant community, we managed to fix that. We also have our rent safe TO that's going strong, and with some good victories actually up on Gamble and getting somebody in and getting their place fixed back up again. I'll just end with hoping everybody is well and staying safe during the pandemic. And we will put up online, I think, all the different vaccine clinics in the East End. But starting on Friday all the way through to Sunday, all weekend, there are vaccine clinics for people that haven't had their first. One at Riverdale on Friday, Monarch Park on Saturday, Medina Masjid on Saturday, Danforth Collegiate Sunday, Eastdale Collegiate Sunday, and one on Eastern Avenue on Sunday. So if you haven't had a chance to get your first dose yet, you will have it this weekend because there's so many clinics in our part of the city. So those are my just remarks about what we're doing in the city. What I'd like to do now is introduce our really fantastic panel that we've got tonight. And I know you're really going to be interested in everything that they have to say. And we have, I'll just introduce them all. Carly Wilson, who's a caseworker at the Center for Equality, Rights and Accommodation. Jordy Dent, we all know you, Jordy, FMTA. Luis Mayorga is a community legal worker, paralegal at Don Valley Community Legal Services, formerly Flemington, formerly East Toronto, now merged into one big mighty legal clinic. We're very happy to have a mighty legal clinic. And lastly, Shahed Shafazand, and she is with East York Acorn, and she's going to fill us in on that big victory. So we're so happy to have you here tonight. I'm going to start with you, Carly. You are a caseworker and a human rights educator at CERA. and you're a lawyer. You have a BA and a JD from the University of Victoria. You'd worked at a firm representing nonprofit housing providers and cooperatives before moving to CERA to provide legal advocacy and information for tenants. And I just have to say what a great job CERA does. And thank you very much for all of your great work. So please take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us here to talk to you today. I'm just setting a timer on my watch because I tend to be a little long-winded, but I'm going to keep it brief while still sharing as much information as possible. So I'm just going to put a quick presentation up so that I know what I'm talking about as I go here, and talk a little bit about the state of evictions and kind of where we're at. Paula and Peter, you both did a good job kind of establishing a bit of a framework about what kind of changes have been happening, both provincially and locally, but to kind of dig into what those mean for tenants. First off, the question that we get asked a lot about is the eviction moratorium and kind of where it's at. As we know, the emergency order is in effect until June 2nd, 2021. And the last time I wrote that slide, it was promising. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, that's tomorrow. So the eviction moratorium is in effect until tomorrow. The part of the actual residential evictions that's covered under that moratorium is a regulation hidden inside a larger piece of provincial legislation. And essentially what that eviction moratorium did is does for 12 more hours, is stops evictions at the sheriff enforcement level. That's really important because that's the final step, the final stage of an eviction process. And the residential eviction regulation essentially says that no person shall attend a residential premises for the purpose of enforcing an LTB eviction order. So that means that no one up until tomorrow could have a police officer or a sheriff officer show up at their front door and tell them you got to get out. Basically trying to prevent that intense immediacy of you are now not welcome back inside your own home. Which is a good thing during a global pandemic. You don't want to have people out on the streets, but as I'm going to dive into in a second, it was perhaps not the best place to pause that process. So there are a couple of concerns that came up with the eviction moratorium, and I think now that it's being lifted, we're going to see more lasting effects of those concerns. The biggest one that I ran into working with CERA as a caseworker, what that means is that we operate a tenant hotline where people call us all day, every day. Unlike other services, we don't have an income cutoff, so we get a really broad kind of spectrum of people that are contacting us from all across the city of Toronto, but also across the province. And the biggest issue that we were hearing about the eviction moratorium is just general misinformation. Tenants do not understand where that cutoff is. They don't understand that when you're facing an eviction, the sheriff's the kind of the last step of the process, all they've really heard is you can't be evicted because COVID. And that is the most common sentence that I would hear people say. And first off, it's not true. There were exceptions to the eviction process. And also it didn't really, it perhaps led to people not taking eviction notices, LTB hearings, and eviction orders seriously. There were people that were calling me when they received an eviction notice from their landlord saying, oh, but it's okay because I'm not being evicted, right up until someone calling me when the sheriff was knocking on her door saying, but it's okay, I can't be evicted. And it's the answer to that question always is, it depends. And I think that misinformation and that miscommunication created a lot of problems and a lot of confusion. The second concern that we kind of have about the eviction moratorium itself was that the sheriff's enforcement level of the eviction process gives the least amount of notice. There's no real requirement for the sheriff to provide notice that they're coming to kick you out of your home. If it's after the date on an eviction order, they can just show up. Other stages in the eviction process, you have a bit more time to fight or to come up with a defense to that eviction. So when you receive an eviction notice, it has a termination date on it. And if you take certain actions before that date, you can sometimes void that notice. With an eviction order, there are sometimes different clauses involved where if you behave a certain way or you pay a certain amount of money, you can void the eviction order. When the sheriff's knocking on your door, you don't have a lot of time to come up with a new plan. And so while stopping it at that place kind of prevents people from getting kicked out right away, now that things are going to be kicking up again and their enforcement's going to begin again, people are going to have no idea that they're facing an eviction tomorrow or Friday or next weekend. There's no notice provision in there saying that thing that was paused for 3 months is now back on your doorstep. It's now your problem again. Another concern that we have is the emergency break nature of the different emergency orders creates a lot of confusion, and it ignores the reality of the eviction process, which is to say that evictions are not quick. They take a couple of months to process, and there are often a lot of dates involved. There's a lot of stop and start dates, and without looking at those realities, the stop and start of the eviction of the emergency orders really doesn't address and doesn't account for the length of an eviction procedure. And then the last problem was that the landlord and tenant board had the discretion to expedite evictions, which is a huge concern. Even they were given some parameters, but even then it wasn't preventing people from necessarily being kicked out of their homes when you have loopholes like that. My timer already went off, so I'm going to scoot right through here. Common issues that we're seeing that are causing evictions are significant amounts of arrears. Thank heavens for the Toronto Rent Bank becoming the grant program. I can't wait to hear more about that, but that was a huge save. But the volume and the amount of arrears is out of control. The amount of N12 notices we're seeing has gone through the roof. So N12 notices are when a landlord's trying to move in to a unit or they're selling the unit, and the volume has ticked up probably 4 or 5-fold since February, and that's been wild to see. Last things that I'll just scoot through really quickly is that service organizations like ourselves and legal clinics are kind of overwhelmed by the volume because of how many people can't pay their rent right now. Repairs and maintenance issues also aren't getting addressed as quickly as possible because of stopping and starting on who's allowed to come into a unit. And lastly, because of the legislative history that we've seen kind of come through since the Ford government, there's been a massive breakdown in trust between the landlord and tenant relationship, from Bill 184 to the stopping and starting of the LTV process, above guideline rent increases, vacancy decontrol, ending rent control. Landlords and tenants don't trust each other, and that creates a really tense relationship for everyone. And with that, I will stop sharing the screen and pass it over to my colleagues here who will speak about their other issues kind of coming up. But thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much, Carly. That was so informative. And you're so right with the moratorium finish, thinking of all the people that can't pay their rent will be moved out. And we already have a terrible problem in the city with people that don't have homes trying to find a place to stay. So this will just exacerbate it so many fold. Thank you for all the work you do every day. Jordy, where are you? Your camera's off. I'm gonna have to ask you to get that on now because you're up. And Jordy Dent, you're the Executive Director of Federation of Metro Tenants Association, and you've been a housing and tenant advocate in many different places, Indonesia, Europe, Vancouver, and Toronto for the last 20 years. You folks are fantastic, helping organize people, fighting above guideline increases, and been fighting that up on Gamble with us. Thank you very much. So take it away, Jordy Dent.
Thanks, folks. I'm not going to have a presentation. I'm just going to kind of give you my spiel on a couple things. First of all, why you should love organizing. Second of all, why you should hate above guideline rent increases. So organizing is something you hear a lot of, and I know for some of you maybe in the audience right now might be like, do I really have time? Do I really have, is it really something that I want to do? But I strongly urge you all to organize in your buildings or tenant groups to organize with. I urge you to organize with Toronto Acorn, which is a great agency that was on the call today. And really organizing you should do for kind of 4 specific reasons. The first one is education. I can't tell you how many people end up paying money or moving out or agreeing to give up things they don't have to agree to because they just don't understand what the law says. My favorite example of a tenant association pushing back against that was a landlord last year that tried to get everyone to pay for air conditioning. A sweet young guy or older gentleman who I'll just call Yoshi, who lived in a building in Etobicoke, wrote up on a piece of paper a handwritten note, went and photocopied it, put it under every door in his building just saying, hey, we don't have to pay for this. You can call the Tenant Federation. I talked to Yoshi. He got really good pull from that. His landlord was furious, didn't know who it was. But he ended up saving tenants somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, $15,000. And if you want to see an example of this in the news, I believe Mariana is on this call. Her building, a woman named Patricia did this in her building in Park Vista. Again, pushed back against the landlord, and I think we totaled it up and it was something like $17,000. So, you know, just telling people, no, you don't have to move. No, you don't have to pay is a tremendously powerful thing. And like 90% of what we do at the FMTA is that. We explain to people and try to give them the confidence to say no, which can be very stressful and difficult. The second thing in terms of organizing that I strongly recommend people do is, or that organizing helps with, is pushing back. Landlords will often not do maintenance. They'll try to take away services. Some superintendents will be very harassing. Landlords will try to push you out. They might not do very safe things when they're doing construction in their building. And tenants can organize together to push back against these things. They can file court applications. They can bring in city inspectors like municipal licensing and standards. They can alert the fire prevention office to fire code violations. Public health to kind of problems in the building that might be very dangerous. If the landlord's doing construction in a way that they shouldn't be, they can bring in Toronto Builds. They can file applications at Human Rights Tribunal if there's discrimination. And often when a landlord tries to get an above guideline rent increase, they can help tenants organize to push back against that with our office or with other people. And look, you know, organizing works. Acorn right now is dealing with a building at, I think, 25 Leduc that was trying to get rent evicted, and they went in there to help them organize and stop that rent eviction. And again, people are now staying in their homes and pushing back against the landlord that was operating poorly. There's also play. A lot of tenant associations and tenant organizing is just doing nice things together. The Village Green Tenant Association downtown, they organize a toy drive every year for folks. They do a monthly meet and greet. So it's not always about just, you know, getting the battering rams and getting the flags and storming the landlord's office. Sometimes you just can do nice things together. And the other thing that tenant associations and organizing does is connect with others. You know, you've got a councillor and MPP on the phone right now that want to help you. They want to ensure people aren't being taken advantage of. As you heard earlier on, when they found out about a bunch of sketchy air conditioning stuff last year, when thousands of people were indoors trying to stay at home in brutal heat, they helped. They were able to connect with tenants and then connect with landlords and try to tell them to kind of follow their legal obligations. Finally, I just want to talk a bit about above guideline rent increases. I don't know how many people on the call have had above guideline rent increases. These are like extra rent increases on top of the normal amount that you pay. They're a scam. They are a brutal scam because essentially the landlord's able to get money from you to do maintenance that they actually should have been doing the whole time. We call it quadruple dipping at the FMTA because the landlord gets the rent, they get the extra rent, they get equity in the building that you end up paying for, and they get tax credits off the work that you pay for as a tenant. It's infuriating. And if you look at the origins of it, people said, oh, we needed to get landlords to do maintenance, even though there was no evidence for that. So a lot of people are facing this. We just want to say that you can fight these. You can get significant reductions in them sometimes. You can get small reductions on them other times. But our office, thanks to the City of Toronto, runs a program to help you fight these things. And we want to help continuing to help you fight them until they are obliterated and in history in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jordy. Thank you for all the work that you do, defending tenants' rights and helping people get through all those difficult things around rents and conditions and everything else. Much appreciated. Our next guest is Luis Mayorga. And Luis is a community legal worker. He's a licensed paralegal, and he's up there at what I call the mighty housing team at Don Valley Community Legal Services, our brand new strengthened legal team in the East End. You do go to the landlord and tenant board regularly to assist tenants when they're facing evictions, Luis, and you speak at a lot of community events about tenants' rights and assisting tenants. You know all about the landlord tenant board, what's going on up there, very helpful. And also, I understand you know a little bit about air conditioners and what you can and can't do. We've actually had a few questions coming in now because landlords are telling tenants they can't have them. So I know you'll give us some great advice and some really interesting experiences that you've had dealing with landlord and tenant board. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Paula. Well, this new world of virtual hearings has been particularly challenging for tenants, and more in particular for those tenants who are vulnerable people. And those are the people we deal with on a regular basis. People on disability, seniors, people who have language barriers. This is something that has been challenging and difficult to navigate. It used to be that a tenant would appear at the landlord tenant board, and you know, sometimes people are afraid or intimidated, but thanks God there's always at every office duty counsel, and you know, people sign up for, you know, to have a you know, a few minutes of consultation free with a lawyer, a paralegal, about their matter, and they were, you know, assisted. What I hear from my colleagues at Duty Council is that it's a whole different game now. Tenants, if they find a way to call in or to participate in the hearing, and cannot get the same level of service from Duty Council. They're struggling themselves because of the way they set up the hearings. Sometimes one staff has to be on different hearing blocks at the same time all over the province. So it's being very difficult even for Duty Council to help people. So, you know, you know, the sense is that people are falling through the cracks. They get no help. And this is terrible news for tenants who have difficulty just, you know, getting in the first place, and they're not getting assistance. On top of that, the delivery of service at the board, I hear is being, you know, bad for many people. Tenants are not getting notices. Sometimes they get no notice at all, and all of a sudden they're getting an eviction order. And they don't know, you know, where this came from. You know, things go missing, and on top of that, when people sometimes try to do something about it, like file a review of the eviction order or file a motion to set aside, then again, it is not that simple to get this documentation into the board. I hear that people at some point were going everywhere just to find a fax machine. People don't have that, you know, sense of where they can, how they can get these documents on an emergency basis to the board. And then again, when they manage to do it, sometimes it's not processed, or it's not processed on time, right? And we're talking with enforcement, even though it was suspended, but really it is a lot of anxiety over this, and you know, very hard to navigate the system. Disclosure, for example, there's a number of disclosure rules, how to produce your evidence to the other party when you're working remotely. It's challenging, even for lawyers and paralegals. So I can imagine for the average tenant or vulnerable people who are not tech savvy, it just becomes impossible, right? So I mean, this all comes together, right? And the stakes are so high. I mean, for a landlord, and it really affects everybody, because landlords also, you know, the delays and everything. But for a landlord, this is a delay, is an inconvenience. For a tenant, one of these issues means that they can become homeless, right? So the stakes are are higher for tenants, for vulnerable tenants in particular. However, the board expects everybody to just, you know, to just do it, right? That's the expectation, that people will just manage, but that's not what's happening. A lot of people are struggling, and you know, evictions are happening without people having really a way to deal with their to respond. But the board, that's just, I guess the goal is efficiency, all right? To deal with many applications as possible, but sometimes this efficiency will come at the expense of natural justice. So it is a big concern, right? We see this as an issue of access to justice, right? And that's why it's so important. That's why important that we keep you know, discussing it, and we try to improve the system. I understand also there's a number of concerns about air conditioners, and I'll be glad to, you know, to discuss those as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Luis. Thank you very much, because we have a few questions about air conditioners, as well as many others, but it's good to know we have an expert with us. Our last presenter and speaker, where are you? There you are. She is Shahed Shafazand from Acorn. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. You can help me if you need to. I don't mind. You are an East York Acorn member, and that's very exciting. East York Acorn is a very strong Acorn group in the city. You got involved to fight for a more affordable city with healthy homes and affordable internet for all. And I know you've had a big campaign doing that. Acorn is a membership organization of low and moderate income people that has over 140,000 members in 9 cities and 23 neighborhood chapters. And you are here from one of the neighborhood chapters today, Shahed. So please, you're going to talk about organizing locally, and I'm sure you'll also talk about some of the victories that you've been able to win.
Yes, absolutely. I can do that. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really, really happy to be here, everyone. It's awesome to see so many people. It's really, really exciting. Again, as Paula introduced me, I'm Shahed. I'm from East York chapter of Acorn. And as Jordy mentioned, I think I'm also a true believer in organizing, and I think it's quite powerful. And that's why I joined Acorn, and as Jordy mentioned, I think, like myself and many other tenants, before I joined, you know, I felt very much so that I'm very alone in the fight when it comes to so many different social justice issues. But joining Acorn and so many other similar organizations, you find out that, you know, not only are you not alone, there are so many other members that are willing to give a hand, support, and, you know, organize together. And I think, as a track record shows, organizing actually does work. So as it was briefly mentioned, we recently had a huge victory with the rent grant in Toronto. And with that comes the fact that the loans that a lot of the clients had applied to after April in 2020 is going to be converted to grants, so they don't need to repay it, which I think is amazing news. And the fact that, you know, the rent back grant pilot program is also going to continue. So I think that's great news for tenants. But again, to talk about organizing, I think when it comes to the issues that we have, evictions and also the above guideline increases, we really, I think, need to keep pushing. And I really do invite everyone to join us or any other organization that organizes around these issues that we have, so that we can, you know, push back against all of these massive loopholes. As a lot of members like Mariana, who's on this call, also has been fighting for a long time, especially the above guidelines increases. And it was a little mentioned right now is that, you know, a lot of times landlords use these so that they can increase the rent above what they are allowed every year. So they use a lot of tactics, like they don't repair the buildings, and then they harass the tenants, and then, you know, they suddenly do a big, massive capital project and they use it at the tenant board so that they can basically increase the rent. And, you know, this shouldn't happen, because the truth is that tenants, it's not like tenants own the building, right? And a lot of times these landlords, because they're big corporations, have already paid off the mortgage and the rent is just pure profit. So there's no reason for tenants to be on the hook for these building upkeeps. And I think we also had an amazing organizing event happening in East York. I think it was around, it was a couple of weeks ago. I think it was May 15th that we organized around, again, these AGIs on Danforth Avenue. And I think that was also a big, huge victory, because we got a lot of coverage, including CBC covered the organizing. And, you know, they talked about AGIs. And I think for a lot of people that may not have known what it was, that was a very good exposure for a lot of other tenants to, you know, get on board and realize that, you know, it works. And there are so many of us who are on this, I guess, on this together. And when it comes to evictions, I think, as again was discussed a little bit, I also, again, I'm a true believer that organizing, again, works. And Acorn has had a very long campaign to stop evictions. And while we have won a temporary eviction ban, there's also a lot of loopholes in that. So we, again, need to keep pushing. As it was mentioned, again, it's not like the pandemic is over. And also, we also need to close these loopholes so that even after the pandemic, landlords cannot abuse these loopholes later on. So long story short, I don't want to go over my time. I think personally, being a member of an organization that, you know, have all these members who have a vote and decide on what matters to the community, to be able to organize and, you know, make the communities a better place that we want, it really, really matters. And trust me, organizing works. Look at our campaigns online, from affordable internet to housing to rent freeze, everything. We've managed to win big in Toronto and so many other cities by organizing. So thank you again, and I really hope you join us, and please shoot any questions if you have. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shahed. I'm just going to do another poll here. I think Rob's going to put that up. Rob, what your top issues are, most important ones. You may have more than one. What are they? Is it the above guideline increase? You're worried about evictions. You've got bad maintenance in your building, affordable rents, not sure of what your rights are, or problems with neighbors. So those are the issues or concerns. And please, the voting is now open. Is the voting open, Rob?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Okay, I just see the poll.
Yeah, no,
Maybe you can see it, Peter. Can you see it?
people are voting furiously, Paula.
Okay,
furiously.
you can see it all. You tell us about it then.
Well, we've got about 70% of people have voted so far, and we just have a few more seconds, I think. But I'll say overall, unaffordable rents are definitely the leading issue of people who've attended this evening. I'll give people a few more seconds to vote. If you haven't voted already, please jump in. Okay, I'm going to end polling and share results. So as you can see, overall unaffordable rents, top issue. Above guideline rent increases, your second, threat of eviction. Third, not sure of my rights. The next, bad maintenance and problems with neighbors, low on the list. Not disappeared, but low on the list. Just share that. Okay. And that's it.
Great. So we
So,
have
go ahead,
Q&A
Paula.
questions. Then we have other questions that people have sent in before us.
Yeah,
And we've got great people to answer them. Can I just start with one question, Peter?
absolutely, Paula. We'll tag team it.
Okay, I think this one's for you, Jordy, and it's how do I organize my fellow tenants to fight an application for rent increase above the guidelines? This person is a vocal agitator, they call themselves, which is, I think you think that would be a good thing, Jordy. Is there any way this could jeopardize the tenancy if they did organize around the above guideline increases? So how do you organize? What do you do? And would that have an impact? Would the landlord be able to take action against the tenant?
So I'm going to start with the second part, which is, can a landlord retaliate against you organizing? The answer is not legally. So there's no legal way for a landlord to get you out. It's actually specifically against the law if you're trying to organize a tenant association that they can't try to get you out. And that can both be included in any eviction application that they try against you, and you could report them for an offense. Sometimes landlords will just be mean though, or they'll try to pressure you, or they might come down on you. It is something you might have to deal with, but a lot of times no. There's hundreds of tenant associations in the city of Toronto. There's dozens of like regional tenant networks. A lot of people organize, so you might again get a little bit of pressure, but there's no legal way that they can force you out, and nothing legal they can do against you. Second part of that question: how do you organize against an Aggie? First thing I'd recommend you do is call our office. We have an outreach and organizing team that can be reached at 416-413-9442, and you can't write that down or you didn't get a pen, you can just go to our website, torontotenants.org, or Google Toronto Tenants and you'll find it. And what we will do is we'll walk you through the steps. First of all, there's a city program you can apply for to try to get some representation. But if you're just trying to get your tenants together, you are a kind of a vocal agitator against the landlord, we recommend you flyer. You can flyer under the building. You can do that safely. You don't have to risk any kind of COVID stuff. You can then try to meet online, Facebook groups or email, or you can even, if you've got the time and the wherewithal, you can phone everyone and talk to them directly. Or, it's nice outside. You can meet outside and socially distance. There's a half dozen ways to do it. But the best part is to get together, to figure out what you want to do. And again, you can fight those in court. You can try to bring up counter issues with maintenance. You can try to poke holes in the landlord's case. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. We're there to help you do that. Thanks.
So the most important thing is, yes, you can, and phone FMTA, right? And then if you get hassled by the landlord, phone CERA, because Carly will be there to say you can't take retaliation, or phone Don Valley Legal Services. So that's it. Okay, Peter, over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Paula. Luis, I'm going to go to you with one hopefully quick question, and then maybe a longer question. The quick question is, can your landlord prohibit you from putting a Canadian flag on your balcony? And given Canada Day is coming up, this is a relevant question. But the second question would be, tenants in a large building were recently sent notices by their landlord that they couldn't put up air conditioners, and they want to know what their rights are. So if you could speak to the flag and the air conditioner issues, please.
Oh, yes. Well, the Canadian flag, I mean, they should get a rent discount for doing that, right? Being a good Canadian shouldn't be punished. So I'm not sure what's the problem with that. No, I just see nothing wrong with, showing your flag proudly in your balcony. Unless, of course, it's, maybe an oversized flag that is governing the rest of the building, but I see nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
Now with the all these notices that not to have air ACs, you need to look at the leases, right? You need to see, what's the agreement, if there's leases. I mean, just to send a blank letter to everybody doesn't fit them all, right? There's people come at different times. People have different leases with different clauses about this. So it's not a one size fits all, right? So individually, people need to at least pay attention as to whether they are allowed to have these ACs. If they're not, maybe that it's an issue, okay? And some leases completely say that they require the landlord's permission to do that, okay? So a number of things can happen. So just because you get a letter saying you cannot have it, it doesn't mean that you cannot have it. You need to really look at your individual situation.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm just going to say to those who are curious about this question, want to pursue further, Luis, I'm going to suggest they call Don Valley Community Legal Services or email you and get into the details, because you're quite right. That's what we found before as well. It is not a one size fits all. Paula, I've got another question I want to ask, and then I'll go back.
Yeah,
to
go
you.
for it. Yep.
Person writes, I live in a corporate-owned building that routinely ignores infrastructure problems by doing cheap repairs that don't last. I know everyone here this evening will be shocked by that statement. Meanwhile, they're doing repairs on a swimming pool that few people use and are likely to apply for an AGI, which will be the second in 3 years. What kind of documentation would I need to compile to build a case against the landlord? Jordy, I'm going to start with you, and others may have commentary, but you've done an awful lot of anti-AGI work, so please, your comments.
Yeah, so I mean, really the evidence you need would be one of two things. Kind of personal evidence you might have, and that could be photos or videos or witness testimony. But a second kind of thing that you can try to do to get evidence to fight this stuff would be reports from municipal licensing and standards. The city does have bylaw inspectors. They're supposed to come in, and anything that's not up to code, they're supposed to kind of give the landlord a chance to fix it, and if it's not fixed, issue a work order against them. And when they do that, that work order goes on their website. There's also a sheet. You should be able to take that and use it as evidence. Both of those are going to kind of depend on how much time you have. If you've been kind of pushing the landlord nonstop and have these municipal kind of orders from them, you're gonna be able to use that as evidence. If you haven't and are trying to get it within the next month, it's probably not going to happen, just because MLS does take some time to get to that stage. So again, you could bring your evidence, you could bring it to court, and you can say, look, I don't want this extra rent approved at all because they haven't done the work, or I want it only to get approved when the work is done, not for the swimming pool that few people use, but the holes in the ceilings, the pests that might be around, stuff like that. And you can push the landlord that way. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to take one other here, if you don't mind, my friend. And I'm not sure which of this group is best equipped to answer, but I'll read it out. My landlord has now 2 years in a row applied for rent increases above the guidelines. It's not yet gone to the tribunal because of holdup over COVID. Condition for this application is to cover costs associated with energy efficiency improvements. Seems to me this improvement will likely save the landlord money in the long run, while the tenants incur the costs. How is this fair, and what is the likelihood this application will be denied at the tribunal hearing if the tenants want to fight this? And what assistance can tenants get from FMTA or any other group? So I think I may start with you, Jordy, but if others could please chime in, I would appreciate it.
So I think the question was, how is this fair? As I mentioned right off the bat, it's not fair. The landlord is getting you to pay for saving them money. And when we've tried to push back against above guideline rent increases, we've pointed this out, and we've said, look, if you really need to keep them for some reason, why isn't there a sharing amount? Why don't you get some of the money, maybe half, that you pay to save? Unfortunately, the successive governments have not really listened to that. And so again, is it fair? No. But is it legal? Yes. Which takes me to the next part. Is it allowed under the law? Yes. Conservation programs or energy saving programs, and that could include low flow toilets, better kind of energy efficient light bulbs throughout a building. These are all things that a landlord could use to apply for an Aggie. Is there any reason to fight this? There is. First of all, sometimes some of the people the landlord might ask for might not qualify for the Aggie. They might try to put it on them. Some people may have moved in kind of after the work is done, which means they're not supposed to qualify as well. More importantly, some landlords get funding provincially or from the city to do this stuff, and they're not allowed to double dip. They're allowed to quadruple dip with Aggies, but not double dip with energy programs. So if they got some money from the city for this, they can't then also get money from tenants for it. And again, you could contact us. We could tell you about the city program. You could try to hire some free legal representation using the city grant that's available to try to fight a case like this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Did anyone else on the panel want to address this issue? If not, that's good. I'm going to go with a question. Shahed, Acorn does a lot of organizing. You know how to deal with unhappy and unfriendly landlords. One of the questions we have is, what can tenants do when the landlords use dirty tricks, such as sending eviction letters to tenants to intimidate them or force them to sign new payment plans?
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for that. Yeah, I would say I'm going to go back to, yeah, that first of all, I have to say that, yeah, I'm really sorry that's happening. I'm going to go back to organizing and really encourage you to get in touch with us so that, you know, we can connect you to other tenants in your building and see if they're maybe experiencing similar issues, and see how we can actually help you on a case-by-case basis. I can also give you our contact information, which, like Jordy did, you can maybe, if you want, call us at 416-461-9233, or check out our website. And yes, if you get in touch with us, I'm sure we can help you organize or connect you with other tenants and see how we can help you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Paula, I have a question that may touch on you, and I'm going to ask Carly at the same time. The duplex we've been renting for over 10 years has been sold, and we've been given an N12, but we know the new owners will be renovating the house. They're claiming they'll be moving in, but it's 2 units. In any case, we can't find any information anywhere if the fact they want to renovate makes any difference, because they will not be moving in right away, but want us to leave the day they take possession. Is there a website with this info that I have missed, or some way to find out? Thanks. Carly, you first on the legal framework, and Paula, you about renovation information.
Yeah, on the legal framework, I'll give the world's worst lawyer's answer, which is it depends, because it always does.
No.
Unfortunately, that's the answer, and that's kind of why everyone keeps giving their contact information. I think it's because when you're talking about specific tenant issues, you need to know what the notices look like. I would encourage you to check out Steps to Justice, the website that's run. They have really great answers to a lot of these questions. I know they do a great job talking through the N12 notice process, the landlord's own use process. We're also becoming experts on it ourselves at CERA. I had 5 calls about this yesterday morning between 9:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. So it's definitely, it's on the height of everybody's radar. And I'd want to look into it a little bit deeper. So I will toss out our phone number as well, which is 416-944-0087. We answer the phones from 9:30 until 5. Please do give us a call and we can talk about it. Because I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but know that you're not alone in terms of the less than upfront and the less than properly issued N12s. They are rampant and they're everywhere, and there are ways around them. So there's likely a solution. We just need to kind of figure out what the one is for your particular situation.
Okay, Paula.
Carly, I'm just going to, sorry, Carly, I'm going to suggest you put your number in the Q&A, because I think people can see that. Or we'll somehow post all of that, or we'll send, how about it, Peter, after we'll send that out to everybody, all the numbers, so they can get in touch with that. That's great.
That's the way to do it, Paula.
Pardon?
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, we'll do it like that. There's a couple of questions here, and I think really, actually, CERA is the bow down around renovictions and legal. That's definitely, if you're having that problem, definitely that's who you need to go to. There's another legal question that has to do with, are co-ops and TCHC as rental as landlords under the same provisions for rent requirements as any other tenant? Who wants to answer that? If you live in a co-op, do you have the same rights and obligations as another tenant? Or if you're in TCHC, do they have to follow the same rules as any other landlord?
I can jump in here. I worked a lot with co-ops before working at CERA. Co-ops and TCHC are operating under two kind of different systems. So tenants that live in Toronto community housing are still tenants under the Residential Tenancies Act. So that means that they still have all the same rights and responsibilities as a tenant. They are just also beholden to a couple of extra rules that are set by the municipality. But generally speaking, they are falling under the same kind of rights and responsibilities. If you're a tenant that also is receiving rent geared to income housing with Toronto community housing, you're going to have your own reporting requirements, and your rent is going to be controlled under different mechanisms. So yes, they are tenants, but also, yes, they're operating under a different system.
How about for evictions? I think it's for evictions in particular.
For evictions, I know Toronto Community Housing has set different kind of rules about when they are issuing eviction notices right now, but generally speaking, they have to follow the same eviction process as anybody else. Under the Residential Tenancies Act, you get your notices, you get your application. The decisions that's been made about when and how often they're freezing or issuing eviction notices is something that they've been running independently. So that is going to be a little bit different than other tenants living in the city and living in Ontario. Co-ops are a completely different animal. Co-ops are governed by a cooperative board. Co-op members are not really protected by the Residential Tenancies Act, except during the eviction process, but even then it looks a little bit different. If you're facing an eviction or you think you're facing an eviction and you're a member of a cooperative, give us a call and we can kind of talk about what that process looks like, because it is very different from your regular tenant, and the rules that govern it and the process that governs it are a lot longer and a lot more complicated.
Yes, okay, but everybody still has the same 30 days and the same eviction process would have to be gone through for everybody that's a renter, I believe. Right?
It depends. Yes,
Oh,
yes and no.
yeah.
With co-ops, there's extra provisions, there's extra steps that have to be taken. And I will say, I always want to back up that if somebody just because you're a renter does not mean you're protected under the Residential Tenancies Act. It does not mean that you're protected from an eviction. The most important exception being if you share a kitchen or a bathroom with your landlord, they do not have to follow that eviction procedure. You're not protected from evictions the same way. And you're in a much riskier situation.
Yeah, you're not considered a dwelling unit if
you're not considered a tenant. Yeah.
Yeah. Under the RTA. Someone's just written in to say that they have a letter from their landlord saying she has to move by the end of September because they're planning to renovate the property. There's another person who's written in to say they've got a letter saying that they're taking it over and they're going to renovate it. You've got to get out. So can we just hear the best way to refute that? Does somebody have to leave? I think our legal people, we're going to ask you, Luis, and you, Carly, what does somebody do when that happens?
Yes, the first thing you need to do is just look at the notice that you received. And landlords sometimes, and I heard in the case in the previous question that some landlords just send a bunch of notices to see which one sticks. You need to look at this as either or. Are you moving in or you're renovating? And you're serving both notices at the same time. So you need to really look into the actual reason for this eviction. And with renovations, demolition, what is it? So, and Paula, you know, really, because you've done amazing work in the community around renovations, and you know, it's not that simple. And some people say, "Oh, I got an enter thing and I have to go." It's not that simple. There's a lot of permits involved. You know, there's a number of things that they need to you know, tenants need to look at. They need to consult, and of course, you know, there's places, legal clinics, CERA, everywhere they can go when they get one of these. So these are legal documents, and you need somebody to look at that before you you know your options.
Okay.
Did you want to answer, Carly? Did you want to add anything?
The only thing I'd want to add to that is perhaps just a personal pet peeve, but sending a letter is not the same as sending an eviction notice. And one thing that we're seeing a lot of small landlords doing is they'll just send a letter saying you have to be out by this date. And that's not the beginning of a legal process. That's not engaging in the eviction process. They're not doing their job correctly. And a landlord is a job, and they're not following those steps properly if they're just sending you a letter. So if you've received just a letter saying that you need to be out by a certain date, then you need to contact an organization or legal help to kind of figure out what that letter is trying to tell you. But know that the legal process hasn't really kicked off yet, and that your landlord's taking steps either because they don't know what they're trying to do or because they're trying to circumnavigate your rights there.
All good advice. Peter, back to you.
Yeah, if Paula, I know Jordy, you put up your hand at the beginning of this one, and I'd be
Didn't see
curious
it.
as to your input. And I just want to note to everyone, we're coming to the end. So I think Jordy will get your response, and then we'll do a wrap up, because I think we've put out a lot of information tonight. It's been very, very useful. Jordy, your comments, please.
Yeah, we've been seeing a flood of illegal evictions happening over the last 4 to 5 years. And I want to just let everyone know that an eviction notice is not the same as an eviction order. So if you get an N12 or an N13 or an N4, these are all eviction notices, but they don't mean anything on their own. In 90% of the cases in Ontario, you can't be evicted unless the court orders you to be evicted. And they might not if your landlord's bluffing or if your landlord never applies there. That 10% is when you want to call Carly and Louise. And that, Carly did mention a few things around that. If you share a kitchen or bathroom, if you're renting from another renter, these are some examples of when you might not be covered. But the vast majority of people are. There does have to be a process. There does have to be a court process. And I can't tell you how many times I see people move out when they get that email or they get that sheet of paper and they don't have to. And so I strongly urge, if you've got one of those, again, please don't just believe what the landlord says, believe what the law says, and talk to Louise or Carly for that. Thank you.
Okay.
Good advice, Jordy, good advice. Nothing more shocking than getting one of those letters or getting something out of the blue that says you're going to lose your house. We certainly get that. So all of the helping organizations that are here tonight to organize, to get you good information, to get you your legal rights, take a breath, look at it. City, again, renter help on the city's website. That's got some good stuff, but just take that breath and take some steps. Renter help on the Toronto CA website. Peter, why don't you run the wrap up?
I will. Thanks, Paula. First of all, I want to say to all of you who participated this evening, thank you so much for joining us. We got more questions than we could get through in a few hours. So we've tried to pick the ones that were most representative. If you have need for further assistance, obviously you can contact my office, contact Paula's. Where we can help you, we will. Where we don't have the technical ability, we refer you on to these fine group of panelists that have joined us this evening. They do amazing work. Seriously, we've worked with them for a number of years now, and they really do come through with the goods. So please don't hesitate. Paula and I have been working together very closely on landlord-tenant issues. We seem to be able to work both sides of the street, the city side, the provincial side. My hope is that after the next election, we'll actually be able to get in some real legislation to protect tenants and stabilize things in the whole rental market. The way things are going now, it's just making life very, very difficult for people. So I want to thank all of our panelists. You were wonderful, very informative, very clear. And I look forward to staging this with you again and hopefully, really hopefully doing it live in the fall so that we can actually be in a room somewhere in this riding and have a good open discussion as we've had in the past. I want to thank my staff who pulled this together. They do a tremendous amount of work. They've been working behind the scenes this evening, making sure that everything functioned. I want to thank Paula's staff as well, a good team for us to work with. And to all of you again, thanks for joining us. Look forward to meeting you again. And don't hesitate to get in touch. If you need our help, that's what we do. That's why you vote for people. Have a good evening, everyone. And oh, by the way, we will be posting this. We've recorded it and we will post it. Bye for now.
Bye. Stay
Bye-bye.
safe, stay well.